Thank you for joining us this afternoon. As we still have some people coming in, I'm just going to get started with some housekeeping items. My name is Katie Schauer, and I'm the Digital Marketing Specialist here at InSource. We'd like to welcome you to our next Experts on Tap presentation. As we record this session today, we will be offering that for you via a follow-up email later next week, so you will be able to share that with colleagues or rewatch as you need to. We are also accepting all questions in the Q&A and chat boxes, and we will be answering those at the end of our session. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jason Paquette.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. My name's, like I said, Jason Paquette. I'm the marketing manager here at InSource. And I'd like to start out by kind of telling you a little bit about our purpose, InSource's purpose, vision, and unifying principles. InSource is a company with a strong culture here. We have a clear sense of purpose as well as a unique approach to fulfilling that purpose. This is relevant in that it allows us to establish fit more quickly, knowing our strengths, and that we work best with clients that have similar value and culture. From edge to enterprise, we operationalize digital solutions to deliver transformational results. And really, our ultimate vision is to revitalize manufacturing in America. And today, we are heavily invested in making the industrial digital revolution a reality for thousands of industrial companies, just like yours. We bring industrial 4.0 technology and beyond to the table, and then we add our secret sauce that helps companies truly integrate those technologies into their process and routines. So kind of in other words, what's unique about InSource is that we operationalize manufacturing IT solutions. Next slide, please. So Experts on Tap is, I think this is our second go around. And really what the whole purpose of this is to do a deep dive into certain topics that you've all been interested in. So we'll do a poll at the end of the day, and that kind of guides us a little bit into what topics we should do. And also, we want to do this in a short amount of time, so that the goal is to hit 30 minutes, so that if we can do this at lunch and you got 30 minutes to sit there and eat your sandwich, you know, you got only 30 minutes, and so we'll try to cover as much as we can in that 30 minutes in these deep dives. So with that, I'm going to turn this over. Today we have Dillon Perera from InSource, and as well as Mario Meza, who's our tech support, and they're going to do our little deep dive into our AVEVA InTouch Scripting. So we're going to do a little bit of overview on that. So I turn it over to the experts.
I wanted to take time to talk a little bit about scripts, what scripts are. Scripts are just basically packaged sets of instructions that perform a particular task. We use scripts.
You're not sharing your screen. You need to share.
My apologies.
No worries.
Okay, can you see my screen now? Sorry about that.
You're good to go.
Thank you again. Sorry. So, like I said, scripts are just basically packaged sets of instructions that we use to perform a particular task. These scripts are then called at various points in the application, and by default, InTouch comes with a library of pre-built script functions that allows you to, and also allows you to create your own. Some examples where you might want to use a script would be to define the position where a window displays on screen, or read a CSV file, write a CSV file, send an email. Maybe you want to assign default values to controls when an application is started, for example, setting a radio button, or to start other applications to provide access to frequently used resources, for example, Excel or the command prompts. So in InTouch, scripts are categorized by the trigger type, or the event that causes the trigger to execute, the script to execute. Now, although it may not translate perfectly, the following memory aid helped me a little in remembering the InTouch script types. Key window conditions change active applications quickly. So just to cover some of the basic scripts, key scripts occur when a key is pressed, window scripts when the window opens, closes, or periodically, condition scripts when a predefined condition is met, data change, a tag or expression changes value, ActiveX scripts when an ActiveX event occurs. Application scripts occur when an application is started, shut down, or while it's running. Action scripts are typically associated with a touch link animation or an object, like a push button animation. And then finally, quick functions. These are name scripts that you create with custom instructions. Once they're defined, they can be reused, which helps avoid code duplication. And modifications are then easily made in a centralized location. In the following example, we're going to add a button to an InTouch window that will launch another program. To do this, we're going to use the help of the Start App function. So we'll switch over to our InTouch. So first, what we need to do is add a button. We'll add a button and update the text. And we'll call it Now that we've updated the text on the button, we need a way to define the action that will occur when the button is pressed in runtime. So we'll double click the button and select action under the push button animations. This will bring us to the script editor. Here we see the condition type, or what will cause the script to execute, in this case, when we click the button. Here's the script body. Once that trigger is activated, our script will then run. So with the script, we can do basic things like add values to tags or perform math functions, even have basic if statements. But a lot of times, we want to be able to do something bigger. To do that, an example of that might be moving files on a hard drive, connecting to a database, or in my case, starting another program. So to do that, Wonderware has given us a number of pre-built scripts. Most of them you can figure out just by the name. For instance, like play sound will play a sound file, but a lot of times you're not sure, or maybe you just need a little help. Fortunately, Wonderware gave us this help button where it brings up the same function list, and we can select our script. In this instance, we want to use Start App. So we'll find the function, and it takes us directly to the help file. Here I can see some general information on how to use it, and even an example at the bottom. You see here that Start App only needs a path to the executable as a parameter. So we can get this a couple of ways. First, we could go to the executable itself, where it's running in our application directory. And if you right-click, hold Shift and right-click on the executable, you'll get this option, Copy as Path. With that information, I can paste it directly into the editor. Another way to do this is with the use of a memory tag. Now, I already defined this tag called app folder. And it's basically just a memory tag that will store the path to the directory. And we'll add the executable name that we want to run. And we'll end with a semicolon. Now we'll validate our script and make sure there's no errors. So if we run this as it is, a side effect or bug will be that every time the button is pressed, another instance of the application will be open. So to avoid this, we can check if the application is already running. We'll use an if statement for that. At a high level, an if statement just checks if a condition is true. An if requires 3 basic keywords to run: if, then, and if. So if the condition is true, then it will execute the script or scripts and finish at the end if. If the condition is false, it will not execute the script, so nothing happens. Let's apply one in our example. So in order to make this if statement work, we need the help of another function, info app active, which returns a bool based on the running state of the specified application. It requires a string parameter, which is the application name in the Windows task list. You can find this by launching the task manager, and with the application running, enable the process name column. it was already enabled. But here we'll see that is the name of the application. So now our script checks to see if the application is running. If it is, info app active will return a 1, which will not equal 0. Then it'll just exit out without doing anything. Let's test this in runtime. Our application is currently running, so we'll close that down. Now, when we click the button, our application should launch. And if we click the button again, nothing happens because the application is already running. So in summary, we added a button to InTouch window with a touch action script, used the start app function to launch an application, added an if statement with info app active to check if our application was already running, and avoided a bug in our script. But if we had multiple applications or resources we needed to provide access to, we could add an individual button for each. That would work. However, we might take up valuable screen real estate and would be duplicating scripts. So any changes would require us to visit each button individually. An alternative option is to use a list box. We can populate the control with a list of application options. And then based on the user selection, we can then launch the desired application. So let's take a look how this would work. First, we'll add a list box to the window by launching the wizard icon. Then select the list box from the Windows Controls group and click OK to place it on the window. Now, we have to give it a name. So we can do this by double-clicking the application. We'll call this app list box. And we need to define a memory message tag to hold the application selection. Now, I've already defined a tag called selected app, but it's just a memory tag to hold the application information the user selects at runtime. And we'll click OK. Now, to populate the control with the application options, we'll use the Windows on show script, and we'll use the WC load list function. I'll right-click on Window and select Window Scripts. This time we see the script editor, but the condition is different. While showing is the default, what we want to do is set this to on show. Now the script will run once when the window first opens. So the name of the script we want to use is WC load list. Looking at the help file, we can see that the required parameters are the control name and the file name, which is the file we'll be reading from, the application list. If you note, this function will check the application directory by default if the full path isn't provided. So we don't need that app folder memory tag like we used in the button example. Since we're going to be using the file to fill the control, it needs to be in a specific format, which is indicated here in the README. I've already created this file, so let's take a quick look to validate. This file is located in my application directory. But if you see here, the control type is listed at the top along with the total number of items in the list. Then each list item on the left will be displayed in the control at runtime. And the item index is a unique number for each entry. So this number is what we're going to use to identify once the selection has been made. So let's go back to the script editor and we'll enter our script. Now, when we put the view in runtime, we'll validate our script first. Checks OK. We didn't get any errors. When we put the application in runtime, the list box populates, but nothing happens just yet. If you recall from my introduction, we have different kinds of scripts, and this difference is simply what triggers the scripts to run. So in this case, we need to use a data change script, and we'll monitor that selected app tag we created when we named the list box. This time, any changes to that tag will cause the script to run. So remember that item index? We're going to use the getProperty function to get the unique number specified in the text file, but we're going to need a tag to hold that value. Now, I've already created a tag called LBIndex, and it's just basically a memory integer that'll hold that information. Now, we're going to add a data change script by right-clicking on the data change and selecting New. In the tag name field here, we need to specify the tag that we want to monitor for changes, which is selected app. Now, you can enter this manually, or you can access the tag dialog box by double-clicking in that field, which will bring it up. Select the tag that we want to monitor, which is selected app. Okay, and now any updates to this tag will cause the script in our script body to run. Now we'll add our script. So here, the first function, getPropertyI, reads a property in the control of that list box and returns an integer value, which is then assigned to that LB index tag. You'll notice that we have a variation on our if statement, and that's because we added some else ifs, which allows us to check multiple conditions. The first if the index is equal to 1 and the application is not running, it'll execute the start app. If the evaluation is false, the script will go on to the next line and make the same evaluation. Finally, we'll end our script with end if for each of our condition checks. We'll validate our script, make sure that it's no errors. We'll click OK, and we'll test this in runtime. Now we see that the applications are populated in the list, and we'll try to select one. And notice that the process steps recorder, when I selected the application for the process steps recorder, launched when I made that selection. Excel launches, but when I make the same selection, another instance of the application is not started. So to quickly recap, we created a simple action script to launch the SMC from a snap-in, from a button press. And we added an if statement to avoid a bug where multiple application instances could be launched more than once. We used an onShow script to populate a list box control with values from a file. Then with the data change script, we were able to monitor selections made in the control at runtime. The getPropertyI function allowed us to retrieve that unique number or the item index we defined in our text file. And finally, with a few more if-else statements, we determined which applications to launch at runtime. And now I believe Dillon's going to discuss a more advanced way to use the SMC in InTouch by leveraging ActiveX scripts. Dillon, I'll let you take it from here.
Excellent. Thank you, Mario. Bear with me one second. I'm just going to share my screen here. And so you should be able to see InTouch running on my system now. And as Mario mentioned, what I want to do is sort of build on what Mario was doing there by launching applications, but instead of launching it as a separate application, let's keep the user inside of InTouch and show the SMC within an InTouch window. To do that, we're going to use what are called ActiveX controls. If I click on the little wizard icon within Window Maker, you'll see that Wonderware provides us with 4 ActiveX controls by default, all of them related to the alarm controls. But we don't see one for the SMC. What I can do, though, is come into the Special menu, go to Configure and Wizard ActiveX Installation, and on the ActiveX tab, down below, I'll see a list of all the ActiveXs available on this computer. So let me take a step back and help you guys understand what an ActiveX control is. Essentially, it's a small program. It's a building block for building larger pieces of software. Typically, it's used when a software vendor wants to be able to use their software inside of something like a web page. So we'll often see ActiveX controls for webcam controls, things like Excel, or in my case, I want to use it to show the SMC, or more specifically, the log viewer. So if I scroll down here, we'll see there's a number of different ActiveXs available to us. And as I mentioned, it's based on different software vendors who release this. So the list you see here is going to be different depending on what software is installed on the computer. In my case, I know the SMC, or the log viewer, is always going to be available wherever InTouch is installed, so it's kind of safe for me to use this one. If I did choose something like an Excel ActiveX, it's really important to make sure that when you go and copy this InTouch application to your operator station, they need to have Excel also installed on that computer or whatever other software you're going to use. Otherwise, the control is just not going to work. Okay. So I'm going to click on Install here, and you'll see it's moved it up to this top list. And what that's done for me is if I come back to the wizards, I now see the log viewer control as an option for me. I'm going to select that and drop it on the screen. Once I've done that, though, you'll notice if you're familiar with the SMC and the log viewer section, we're not seeing everything that we would normally see. We don't see any icons, etc. And when I go to runtime, this is going to still show up on the screen, but we're not actually going to see any of the logs that we're wanting to see, really the purpose of this exercise. The reason for that is with ActiveX controls, like I mentioned, they're sort of the building blocks for other pieces of software. And so the software vendors, frankly, don't really intend for us to be dropping them into other programs like InTouch, which means that we have to do some initial configuration so that this ActiveX control knows what it needs to display. To do that, I'm going to create a window script. So on my window here, I'm going to right-click on it and go to Window Scripts. And, oh, that is way too big, but that's fine. You'll see here in the condition type, I'm going to change that to on show. So as soon as this window that has my ActiveX on it gets shown on the window on the screen, I want it to run this script. Okay. And now a big thing that I like to do with any script that I write is start with some comments so that future developers know what I was trying to do. So I'm going to start with a really quick comment here just saying connect to SMC log viewer and display log messages. And then I also like to add in some bragging rights here, saying who was the smart guy able to figure out how to use a script. But also, for future developers, it gives them a path to know who to blame if any problems occur with the script. So right now it's just a comment. It's not going to do anything. But what I'd like to do is add in some statements to have it update that ActiveX control. So at the top here, we're going to use this Insert ActiveX Control icon. And we'll see here the log viewer control, the one that I've dropped on the screen. It's the only ActiveX I'm using currently, so it's the only one in my list. If I select it, on the right, I'll see all the different functions and properties available to me with this control. But you'll notice I don't have a help button like I did with the script functions that Mario was showing us earlier. The reason is, again, this log viewer isn't actually intended to be embedded within InTouch. I've just sort of figured out how to do it through School of Hard Knocks. And that's one of the things with ActiveX is they're not necessarily intended for you to use them. So a lot of times you'll have to search online or go to the software vendor to find documentation on how to use it. So that said, the first thing I need to do, though, is connect the log viewer to the computer whose logs we want to read. So to do that, in the available properties, I'm going to choose this hostname property. And I want to set that to the computer. Now, one thing I want to mention here, the script editor here, if you've not upgraded InTouch in a little while, it is much better nowadays. One thing you guys might be able to appreciate, if you ever RDP'd into a computer or you're doing VNC, something like that, and you're looking at maybe a small panel PC where it's really hard to read the scripts, one of the nice things we can do here is zoom in. It's a minor thing, but makes life much easier. Here I was doing it with Control and the scroll wheel, just like you can do in Office or Chrome. But you can also, on your, if you have a laptop, use the touchpad and do pinch and zoom. That'll work as well. Okay. But what I want to do here is set the host name equal to the computer whose logs I want to read. Now, I could do the actual name of my computer. But again, minor problem. We want to think about the future here. If I was to copy this InTouch application to another computer, well, that name's probably going to be different. So by leaving my computer name in here, it's always going to try to connect to my computer, regardless of which PC it's on. So I could go in here and enter in something like localhost, which Windows recognizes as the local computer. But the other option is to enter a tag. So I've created a tag already called global_computer name. Again, another nice feature of the newer script editor is it'll automatically show you what tags and functions are available based on what you've typed. So I'll enter that in, and just so you can see what's on it, I'll hit define tag, and you can see there's my computer name. It's just a memory message tag. Okay. So I've set up the host name, and then again, like I said before, School of Hard Knocks, I know I have to connect to the computer, but the other thing I need to do is tell the log viewer to do an initial read of the data. So I'm going to come up to our properties and tell it to also do a refresh. Okay. Once I've done that, I can go ahead and click on runtime. And I don't know if over WebEx you were able to see it, but there was a slight delay while this was being launched, but it pulled in the logs. Now, if you ever use the SMC on your own computers, if you have a lot of log messages, the SMC sometimes takes a minute or two to finish populating. And so you need to be cognizant of that and aware of it when you're doing something like that in InTouch, because you don't want this window to be sitting here for a minute or two while it's loading. But if I wanted to adjust the script, maybe for the future, one thing I could do is there is also options to set up filters, right? So that'd be one way to do this. But the big idea here is we can use these ActiveXs to give us additional abilities within InTouch that weren't necessarily intended when InTouch as a program was written. And you can think of this from the operator standpoint. If they're having a problem, they can give you a call. You can have them open up this window, see what log messages have most recently occurred, explain those to you over the phone, and maybe potentially help you solve the problem quicker than you having to walk out to the field. Okay. So that was one example, but I also want to show you another one quickly here based on our time, is how to use some of the industrial graphics and the scripting within them. If you're familiar with orchestra graphics, that's what they used to be called. I'm currently using the 2020 version of InTouch. They've been called industrial graphics now. But I'm going to go ahead and create a new symbol here and open that up. Now again, it's a symbol so you can draw whatever graphics you wanted on here. But I'm going to right-click and go into the Scripts section just to show you the script editor that's available to us. Very similar to the new script editor that we have in InTouch. I can type in whatever text I need. And just like in InTouch, it'll color code the text, highlight when it sees errors, right? That's not a valid keyword here. But it'll also simplify our use of scripting. When Mario first started, he mentioned that there's, what was it, 6 or 7 different types of scripts. Within the industrial graphics, there's now only 2 types: a predefined script that does the on-show, on-hide, etc., and a named script, which basically covers the additional types like condition scripts and data change scripts. Okay. For right now, though, again, I want to use this as a web browser, so let me switch back to Window Maker real quick. One thing I did prior to this call is come into the File menu, Import, and Client Control. Okay. Oh, shut down Window Viewer first. Come on. So for the web browser, I'm gone into the .NET framework, so Microsoft's .NET files, and in here chosen the system.windows.forms DLL. Okay. This guy has a number of different controls in it that you'll see in a lot of different applications, one of them being the web browser control. So you can see those here, the web browser control being one of them. So on my screen, or on my symbol, I'm going to go ahead and embed that symbol within it. Okay. And again, just like before, it doesn't have all the icons and toolbars that you normally see in a browser. It's a very simplified view. But what I can do is right-click and go into the scripts window. And in my script editor, I'll come into the browser and reference that web browser control. And I can see the different properties and functions, just like we did with the ActiveX controls. So for me, I want to use this navigate function. This is where we would normally enter in the URL for the website that we want to go to. So I could type in here something like our homepage address. But it's important to keep in mind when you're scripting that things will probably change over time, right? Computer names will change. Website addresses will change. So what I've done, again, in InTouch, I've already created a tag that has our website address in it. So I'll start typing in, for my tag, it was called global_homepage address. Okay. So again, that's just a memory message that holds the URL. And the other thing I want to do, though, is this web browser control is, like I said, very basic. It can't handle things like JavaScript and newer technologies in web browsers. So I do need to run one other function on here. And that is down here, script errors suppressed. Okay. And now that's not because I introduced any errors or anything like that. It's because this control is not going to know how to run everything that's on this web page. So again, I'll add in a comment. This will really simple. One thing that's different in the industrial graphics is you can use the braces like before in InTouch if you want to comment a block of text, or we now have the option to do single line comments by just using the apostrophe. Okay. One other thing I want to mention, though, that I forgot earlier, in InTouch we have that script browser. If I hit the F of X icon there, we'll see a lot of the similar functions that we had in InTouch. But one of the nice things, we're using QuickScript.net here, the newer version of InTouch's QuickScript. And that .NET piece is important. We have access to Microsoft's .NET framework. So a number of predefined functions, unlike the 50 or so functions that Wonderware made for us, we're now leveraging the entire library created by Microsoft. So a lot more, just a larger, vast array of functionality, but also because this is used in other programming languages like Visual Basic, C#, etc., you can go online and Google how to use a lot of these functions and get some example code. Okay. So I'm just going to have this browse to our homepage and hit OK on here. And I'll save this and drop that symbol onto our window. So now when I go to runtime, fingers crossed, once this loads up, our graphic will show, and it should automatically try to load our homepage. There we go. Now one thing you'll notice if you've been to the InSource homepage recently, it doesn't quite look like this. Okay, again, some of those advanced formatting options and such that are in modern browsers isn't going to work here. Okay? But let me take a step back and go back into that graphic real quick. The reason I mention this as an option is not because I expect your operators to be going on the internet. The reason I show it is because the web browser control is actually pretty powerful. If you think about Internet Explorer, you go to different websites, there's a lot of different content out there, and Internet Explorer is able to handle it. So what I can do is use this as a tool to show off other types of documents. So as an example here, I'm going to add an action script to that button and use that navigate function I was using before. And instead of showing a URL, so instead of HTTP, etc., things like Internet Explorer will let you do an address similar to file : and then where the file is on your hard drive. Okay, so you can see here, I'll pull it up here. I do have a docs folder on my C drive with a text file called important. Okay. So we're just pointing it to the file instead of a URL and where it is. Now again, thinking forward, that file path might change. So ideally, we shouldn't put it hard-coded in here. We should store that in a tag. But I'll leave that for right now. I'll hit OK on this. And again, we'll go to runtime so we can see what that does for us. Again, if you think about your operator out on the plant floor, maybe this is their HMI screen. They have a little web browser window on the side. They're running into problems. They can click on the important document screen here. It pops up the web browser, and it brings up additional information. Maybe this has information as to how to fix a problem. Maybe it's where to find documentation. Maybe it's just contact information for your maintenance team. But it gives you a lot of options here, not only with things like text files, but also things like PDFs, right? You can embed those on here as well. Lots of possibilities here using the ActiveX controls or .NET controls to really just extend what we're getting from the InTouch interface. So that said, in general, just want to highlight a little bit of what we talked about. So InTouch has the QuickScript language. The newer language is QuickScript.net that we have in Industrial Graphics. If you're ever looking for reference material, Wonderware does have some scripting guides that come with the install, but it's also very similar to BASIC or Pascal even. There is a built-in script function library. Again, this makes it really easy to do some more complex things like connecting the SQL databases, etc. And documentation is provided for those. A big thing when using scripts in general is to make sure you're commenting. Okay? You may not think it's important at the time because you're rushing and you just want to get things done. But more than likely, a month down the road, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, you or someone else is going to have to come in here and make edits or troubleshoot your scripts. Having some comments in there will make it easier for you and others. We also have the new scripting editor. With it, we got some awesome new features like Zoom, which is a simple thing, but also color coding, the ability to use autocomplete. And then we also have things like ActiveX controls. That's going to make us able to do things that weren't necessarily built into InTouch itself. And again, .NET, we have .NET controls, which are newer controls, but also the .NET function library. You know, for an example of that, earlier this week, I was using the .NET functions that are available to connect to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, to pull weather data into a symbol. Right? So really powerful stuff there. And then just a comment here, you know, when entering your scripts, think about your computer names, the file names, et cetera, that you're entering. When you enter them as a hard-coded value, it can make things really difficult when you need to change things in the future. Instead, think about entering those into tags. Something like a computer name, if you use it once in one script, you're probably going to need it in other places. So if that ever changes, storing it in a tag will let you change it in one place in the tag, and all your scripts automatically get updated. And then lastly, I want to mention, you know, InTouch is a great tool for writing scripts, but remember that InTouch is a supervisory tool. It's meant for monitoring your process. And so be cognizant of where you're entering the script. The scripts that you're entering, should they maybe be put into the PLC or into SQL Server or something like that? right? If your computer crashes and InTouch isn't running, you don't want your process to go out of control. Instead, we use things like the PLC to make sure that's all handled in the right place. So with that said, that sort of wraps up the presentation portion of this Xperts on Tap seminar.
Great, thanks, Dillon. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A or chat box and we will answer those. Right now, I'm going to open our short poll. I know we're running a little bit over. This will only take a few seconds. We're just interested in what topics you would like to hear from us. And I am going to just share this screen. Perfect. All right, and let me see if we have any questions here while we're running our poll. Whoops. Okay, we do have one question. Is there a limit to the number of scripts you can create?
Yes, that's an interesting question. So to my knowledge, I don't think there's a limit. At least I've never seen it. But that said, kind of like the last point I was making there, if you're throwing a ton of scripts into InTouch, it might be worth reevaluating if you're doing the right thing, right? But no, as far as I know, there's not a limit, at least not a limit that you're likely to hit.
Okay.
Good question.
Great. And while people are finishing up the poll, please feel free to utilize the Q&A and chat boxes. We did get a comment back. Thanks, you guys. I enjoyed the second part the most as I have been using InTouch for a while. I'd like to get more advanced like this seminar. So that's a good comment. Great. Thanks, Pilar. All right. The poll's got about 20 seconds left. And we're using, just so you know, we're using this poll information to direct where we're going with our next coming our upcoming sessions. Our next session will be in 2 weeks, and that will be on our website probably at the beginning to middle of next week, and we'll have emails going out about that as well. And as always, today we will be sending out a follow-up email with a recording of this presentation. And we will send that to everyone who has attended, but also everyone who registered. And you can also forward that to anyone. I do have a couple more questions here. Let's see. If we have problems with scripting, can you guys help me write it?
Yeah, good question. So that's something we struggle with a little bit sometimes, is finding that balance between writing it for you and just managing time, et cetera. But yeah, so if you did have issues with it, you can definitely bounce a call into us for some ideas and such. But definitely we probably don't have the bandwidth to do an extensive thing of writing the entire script for you. But that said, if there was a specific task that you want to complete, you know, connecting to a SQL database, doing certain things that you're just completely overwhelmed with, you could definitely contact us, and you know, we can get one of our experts involved and book some time with them to help you out on that. Otherwise, though, from the tech support side of things, usually they can help with some very small questions, but we probably don't have the bandwidth for larger scripting problems.
Okay. Does InTouch have the ability to create a UDT for a group of tags?
Sure. Yeah. So with InTouch itself, we don't have UDTs necessarily. So for those not familiar with that term, user-defined type, essentially a bunch of tags all in one. With InTouch, we have the concept of what are called super tags. So that's an older method that InTouch had to do this. So you would create a super tag that is for a valve or a motor, et cetera, and define each of the types of tags within it, so integers, reals, et cetera. So you could do it that way. Otherwise, the nicer, cleaner way to do that is by using System Platform or Wonderware's application server, that lets us use a real object-oriented style approach to creating our objects, which gives us a lot more power. But again, that's moving a little bit beyond purely what InTouch has.
Okay. Next question, with 2020, do I still need SQL Server to be able to use industrial graphics, modern apps?
Yeah, really good question. So showing those graphics and everything there, if you're not familiar with them, we got the ability to do what were called modern apps in version 2014 R2, I believe. So 3 versions back, but they required SQL Server. With the latest version of InTouch, Wonderware's made that a lot easier for us. You don't have to install SQL, and it really handles everything in the background for you. So I think there is technically a database in the background, but you don't have to install everything. It just runs a real lightweight database. And if you want to copy the application to another computer, for those of you who might have used modern apps before, with the new 2020 version, you just copy the folder like you used to in older versions. So it's much easier to use it nowadays with 2020, to the point where we've actually gotten rid of the idea of modern apps. We just have standalone InTouch apps, and they have the graphics available for you. You don't have to choose between the two anymore.
Great. You mentioned a guide for scripts. Where can I find this?
Good question again. So definitely within the software itself, you can go to the F1 help or the script function library and hit the help button to see specific help that you can search. But otherwise, when you install the software, by default, there's going to be a number of PDFs that get installed in the books folder, I believe it is. As well, you can look at the install media, and if you go into the installation files, you'll see folders for each of the products. So one for InTouch, one for App Server, etc. And within each of those is a folder called User Docs, and in there, there's about probably 5 to 10 different PDFs for each product that are there and available to you. For InTouch, it's called the IT script guide, I want to say. And then there's another one for in the application server called the A2 script guide, I believe, that talks more about the industrial graphics and their scripting abilities.
Okay. Well, that looks like that's all the questions we have for today. I thank you all for hanging on. I know we ran over a little bit, but I think this was all great stuff. Again, our next session will be in about 2 weeks, and we'll have announcements for that next week. We will be sending this recording out to you via a follow-up email. And if you should have any questions beyond this, please feel free to contact us. You can contact us on our website at insource.solutions. There's a contact us button right in the top of the page, or you can email us directly at communications@insourcess.com. With that, I'd like to thank our presenters, Dillon and Mario, and I hope you all have a great day.